Hey guys, what's up? It's Ripe again. In today's video, an HOA president harassed me for refusing to join her HOA. I later on found my new car missing and the HOA Karen admitted that she had it towed and sold it. Here is what happened. Let's dive right into the story. So I had several changes in my life happen all within about a month of each other. First, I ended up buying a car that I always wanted, a bright red sports car. I remember being little and riding around it once with my uncle and always wanted one like that since. I also moved into a new apartment complex, which I like due to some perks like having a parking spot in a lot and not needing to park in the street, which in my city can sometimes be impossible. The only thing I was nervous about was that there was an HOA, and when I brought up that hesitation to the super of the building, he told me that I did not have to join the HOA and it was very laid back anyway. So I now had a new car that I loved and a pretty decent apartment. It was the first day of me living there when I got stopped by a woman that just looked like a picture of Karen was in the dictionary. The haircut, the entitled look on her face, excessive makeup, etc. She started asking me why I was not at the HOA meeting that day and she had never seen me before. I explained that I had just moved in that day, so I wouldn't have known about the meeting, and also that I did not have any interest in joining the HOA. She went from smug and talking at a normal volume to yelling and raging about me being extremely disrespectful. And that she was the HOA president and I was acting like a child not wanting to be a part of the community. Just going from 0 to 9,000 over me saying a single sentence. Thankfully I managed to get away from her and was ticked off that my super clearly lied when he said the HOA was laid back. This lady was insane and looking back she might have quite possibly been drunk as well. I cannot say for sure. Anyway, things got worse the next day when I went out to my spot to find it totally empty. My car was gone and I knew in my gut that Karen had done something. I approached her. Me, did you do something with my car? Karen, oh, that red eyesore? I had it towed last night for being parked without a permit. She was smugly smiling at me and I was enraged. Yes, it did not have a permit because I was still getting one for the lot. The super said it wouldn't be a big deal since all towing requests had to go through him and he knew it was legal. Me, the super towed it? Karen, no. I did not tell him anything. I just had it towed myself once they saw that there was no permit. Me, get my car back now or I will report you to the police. You stole my car. What is the name of the towing company? She did not answer and instead got in her own car and drove away. I managed to get her phone number from my neighbor and called and texted her trying to get her to give me my car back. She did not respond to anything and blocked my number, so I could not contact her. I did not want to go to her door because I knew that could look bad for me if she called the cops. I tried to file a police station report that Karen stole my car, but it was not really possible. I had no proof it was Karen and they cannot arrest and convict somebody without evidence. The best they could was put a bulletin out for my car. They went to Karen to cover bases, but she of course denied involvement or even knowing that the car was mine. I called all the towing companies in the area and not a single one was involved or could help me. Hope was seemingly lost, but I managed to see that another car facing mine had a dash cam, so once I found that neighbor and begged him to check and see if it was caught, I found my proof. He keeps that camera on even when parked in case somebody hits him in the lot. The video showed Karen standing there and pointing out my car to her tow truck. A private one, so that was why no company I called was involved. I went back to the police with my new evidence and they were able to detain Karen based on that. They were asking her why she lied about involvement the first time. She just started screaming at the car was an eyesore and I was not following her HOA rules. Also that I had to listen to her and she couldn't be arrested for just enforcing the rules. I did not check, but I can be sure that there's no legal HOA rule that gives her the right to just tow my car and refuse to let me gain ownership back. While she was being arrested, she was trying to make a phone call with the police trying to stop her because she was actually under arrest. With her screaming that she had to call her cousin and for the police to get their hands off her. She was being read her rights in the parking lot when out of nowhere a flash of red came into the lot. It was my car with a different license plate. The guy came out and went to where Karen was being arrested and started screaming at her, telling her that he wanted his money back and just pissed that she sold him a stolen car. I guess she called him to come with the car, hoping to avoid an arrest that way because she started telling the cops it wasn't stolen because it was right there. She was still resisting arrest and now trying to say that her cousin should be arrested because he was the one with the car. She did not want to go quietly at all, and more people were gathered to watch the spectacle. Eventually they did get her arrested but had to take my car because it was now evidence in a criminal case too. The DA would charge her with grand theft auto. Now her cousin was not getting charged with anything because police really do think that he was tricked and willing to testify against Karen in court to say that she sold it and told him that she had gotten the car cheap at an auction. And of course, grand theft auto here is a felony, and between testimony and the video evidence, she did not have a chance in hell to get away with this. She pled guilty to avoid a worse sentence and ended up getting 2 years in prison. She also was forced to fully financially compensate me for the car, which might not make sense since I did get the car back in the end. The thing is that once a car is stolen, it can lose up to like 40% of its resale value. That's a harsh hit, and because of it, Karen had to give me money. I also want to point out that the insurance didn't get involved because I held off on that since I was hoping to get Karen the way I did. They were told afterwards that it is attached to my car that it was a stolen and later retrieved car. And the next one is a malicious compliance story. I work in a food catering place which can fulfill allergy-free requests. We have the expertise and care not to include allergic food either as a hidden ingredient or by accidentally sharing contaminated utensils and pans while cooking. In our experience, the 4 most common allergies are peanuts, tree nuts, eggs and milk. Cooking meals without these 4 ingredients will usually satisfy everyone at an event. We had a new client, a food allergy advocacy group. They ordered a large catering last month and did not pay us since. We were out of pocket $2,000 and were considering legal action. This charity had the nerve to place another order with us, but this time a smaller one costing only $450. The group asked for the meals to be nut-free vegan instead of nut, egg, milk-free, as this would ensure them a peanut, tree, nut, egg and milk-free event for cheaper. Basically, as they would avoid our additional allergy-free preparation fees. This was reckless behavior from the advocacy group, as the party attendees were most likely anaphylactic to milk and egg. Think deadly peanut allergies but for dairy, milk, cheese and cream, and egg products instead. Had we not known that they were a food allergy charity, then we would have not taken as much care in ensuring the meals were egg/dairy free and would have just focused on the nut-free angle instead. There was one important thing that charity forgot. It's now possible to buy dairy which is made from lab-grown milk from yeast. The protein is identical to milk, but it's technically vegan. We cooked all the meals with this lab-grown dairy and loaded it in the van. Upon arriving to the function hall, we informed the charity organizers that the meals had lab-grown dairy in them. The charity owner started blasting off on how it was meant to be dairy-free and how they have people deathly allergic to milk in the event. I simply explained that the order was nut-free vegan since we used lab-grown milk and that they had failed to pay us the last order and that this was simply gonna be our team Christmas party if they didn't accept the order. The owner went ballistic and began pushing me, the rest of us restrained him and the function hall had called the police. The owner lied and told the police that we had dropped and assaulted him. The police asked the function hall for the CCTV and then moved us both along. The police did inform us that at the commotion that we could head down to the station tonight and provide a witness statement should we wish to press charges. A few moments later, the owner called and begged for an apology and offered to pay us both the original and today's invoices right there and then. I decided to take the apology and the cash. Our team had a nice pre-Christmas party with the vegan lab-grown dairy meals. And here, Ripe Stars, if you have enjoyed this story so far, please don't forget to like the video and maybe even leave a comment, because that would help me tremendously. Thank you so much, and the next one is a revenge story. I spent about 2 decades working in security. During that time I worked many different types of security in many different locations. The one that matters for this story was time spent in the rental housing tribunal in a major city as a kind of bailiff. For those not knowing what that is, think a courtroom, in a major city anyway. In a smaller town it'll probably be an event room in a hotel or community center, as you would see on TV, but with less formality and an adjudicator instead of a judge. They functionally are the same thing to landlords and tenants, but they definitely are not the same thing. This place exclusively deals with landlords and tenant disputes and is the only place to resolve landlord and tenant disputes. Note that I was not a bailiff and it was not a court, but these terms mostly accurately describe the situation and my place in it. For 2 years I worked at the rental housing tribunal. It was early in my time in security and I was 18 to 20 years old. Being as it was a major city, the sheer number of cases I sat through was beyond my ability to count. I saw everything there was to see. No one is capable of surprising me with a story, because I've seen them all. In detail, as a side duty of mine was to ensure all parties had copies of all evidence being presented. I did a lot of photocopying and always read and inspected everything I copied to ensure nothing got cut off or made illegible. By the time I stopped working there, I probably knew the way everything worked well enough to be an adjudicator myself. Well, no, obviously not, but I'm certainly in no need of a lawyer either, should I ever have the need to go there. I also had intimate knowledge of how the system worked beyond the actual rules, like, for example, adjudicators would always give a little leeway to anyone representing themselves over someone who had a lawyer. Or how pissed off adjudicators would get when a party was speaking out of turn. Seriously, don't do that. Anyway, skip forward almost a decade. I left the city and I am in a fairly large town in the same province, same tenant laws. I have a few roommates in a decently sized townhouse. We get along well, but there's a problem. Only I can write checks and our paydays don't line up, so I'm the one who pays the rent, and I usually cannot do it on the first because roommates don't usually all pay in time. We advised the landlord that we might be a day or two late, but we will always have it by the 3rd at the latest. They have no problem with it at all. I spoke to them myself. For about a year, this works fine. No complaints from landlord, because even if we are often a day or two late, we always pay. We are also fairly quiet and don't damage the property, nearly model tenants. I don't actually have any idea why, but one day this changed. I suspect a different person in the company started overseeing the region. One day, suddenly we got a summons to the Rental Housing Tribunal, hereafter to be referred to as RHT. On the 2nd of the month for failure to pay rent. This doesn't actually lead to a case because we paid the same day, but now we have to pay the application fee the landlord paid in order to serve the summons. I complained to the neighbor, who was also the superintendent, and eventually heard back that their contact at the company was now demanding the 1st of the month, no exceptions. Well, that really didn't work for us, so we probably had to pay that fee 15 to 20 times over the next 2 years. I could have gone to Tribunal over it, but we were technically without a leg to stand on, and I knew it. Maybe if I went enough times I can ding them for harassment, but I don't have time for that and my roommates don't care. After being split between us, all the fee was not enough deterrent to change our behavior, so we accepted it. If this was the only issue, there would not be much story though. At around the same time the rent leeway vanished, so did mandatory maintenance. I'm not gonna list everything that went wrong and was not fixed. You will get a decent idea at the end. We suffered through it though. We were all working too many hours at crap pay to be able to actually do anything about it, and we adapted. However, after about 2 years it broke. Everyone but me up and moved out for various reasons within a 4-month period. I'm not gonna go into details on my roommates at all, because things kind of exploded for a couple different reasons outside of this. No reason to dig any of that up. Either way, I'd been saving up a while and was able to quit my job without having to immediately get another one, so I suddenly had a lot of time. I didn't want to stay and pay the rent by myself or have to find new roommates I could live with, and with my experience in the RHT I knew I had the landlord by the balls. So I went for them. I stopped paying rent, and annoyingly I didn't get a summons the first month, but I did the second, so I went. With a meticulously documented plethora of evidence of failure to maintain the property and entering the property without formal notice. I had a copy for the landlord and a copy for the adjudicator. I know from experience that technically you're supposed to give the other party the evidence before the tribunal, but I also knew about that leeway an adjudicator gives to those who represent themselves. So I didn't give the landlord the evidence until our case came up. 100% total ambush. They argued that they were ambushed, but the adjudicator just dismissed the case, dressed me down a little, and told me to file my own summons, as I should have done. This was the petty revenge. The landlord and lawyer drove 3 hours to get there for nothing. Worse than nothing though, I filed my own summons and the big day shows up. By now, it's been about 4 months of me not paying rent at this point. I'm prepared to if I lose, but I don't think I'm gonna lose. The whole thing could not have gone better. I had 20 to 30 pages of evidence and 20 odd photographs, and they had nothing. They had no actual defense for our water heater being out for 6 months or us not having a fridge for a year, just to mention 2 severe issues. Their entire defense rested on us being late for rent, which actually worked against them once that led to the adjudicator learning how many times we had paid the application fee, and lies that had no evidence to support them. They even talked over me a few times, and I saw in his eyes the one time I opened my mouth to protest during their turn to speak, but forced myself to shut up with every gram of willpower I had, so only a squeak came out. The adjudicator respected me. Though he had no respect for the landlord. I had won on every possible front, the only question was how much. It was more than I'd ever seen. I got 9 months of free rent and the landlord was ordered to have everything fixed before the next month was over, or I would get more. I gave notice that I was leaving at the end of the 8th month and left at the end of the 9th. Because the landlord had never renewed the lease, I didn't have to give him the 3-month notice the lease specified. If you want to figure out to put to it, I basically got a $13,000 judgment in my favor, adjusted for inflation and rounded. I also made the landlord and lawyer drive 3 hours twice only to lose. The landlord's face was so red at the end, I thought he would have a heart attack. He didn't though. By John. Added to clarify a few things based on questions, I also want to add for those good landlords out there, I do feel you. My time in the RHT was eye-opening. For every bad landlord, there are 10 bad tenants easily. There's a massive debate of debates to have over the whole thing. I'll only say that I do sympathize with the good landlords out there. I'm not trying to paint all landlords as terrible. This is the only landlord I've ever had that was so useless. And yeah, Ripe Stars, if you have ever had any experience with terrible landlords, then please feel free to let us know in the comments, because I would love to hear your story. And now let's move on to the next story. It starts like this. Great revenge. My mother, who I was very close with, passed away suddenly from COVID 3 days before Christmas last year in 2021. I live on the other side of the country and my brother lives on the other side of the state from where our mom lived, so we arrived the next day and stayed at her home, our former childhood home, simply to try and deal with everything surrounding a sudden death as well as take care of her cats. My father, we will call him S, has been estranged since I was about 12 years old and I have not spoken to him since then. He was not and is not a nice person, so I am definitely not missing out on anything. My parents never bothered to divorce. Why? Well, honestly, I have no idea, but onto the petty revenge. A few days after my mom passed away, I woke up around 11 AM due to being in a different time zone. My brother is still asleep as he works night shifts, this is relevant I promise, after my brief morning routine. I notice a police car in the driveway and head outside to find out what's going on. The officer asked if I lived there, so I explained the above story to him as to why I was there. At this point I had started crying, having to go through everything again. The officer then asked if I knew someone named S, which completely floored me. I told him yes I did, he's my father who I've not spoken to in over 15 years. The officer then tells me that S called the police saying that someone was trespassing on his property and wanted them out. The someone being my brother and I. Apparently S came to my mom's house early that morning and no one answered the door as we were both asleep. He assumed we were ignoring him and called the police. My brother has his number blocked, but he called and left a voicemail saying he would be back with the police to bust the door down. Which we heard later that day. Since my parents never divorced and my mom's will was almost 30 years old at this point, that meant that the house was legally his now. After the officer explained to me the situation, I see S pull in the driveway. The officer tells me that I did not need to interact with him at all and said I could wait inside while he spoke with him. S ended up giving us until the end of the day to leave the premises. So my brother and I, along with a couple of family members that lived nearby, helped us collect some of our childhood possessions and photo albums and then left. I flew home the next day. What S arrived to the next day, no he was there, he texted me asking where my mom kept her cash, was a disaster. My mom had 2 elderly cats that had issues with finding the litter box at times, so there was cat pee and cat poop scattered through the house that we did not bother to clean up. There was also decomposing food in the kitchen. A couch was overturned in the living room, we had to flip it to catch one of the cats, the trash had not been taken out for a while. There were also dirty dishes in the sink, and on top of that he now had a house with over 30 years of accumulated belongings that he now had to clean and empty by himself. My brother and I had planned on cleaning as well as we could, as well as start the process of preparing the house to sell, but thanks to S calling the police on us, that was now all his problem. He ended up sending my brother a letter through a family member complaining about how messy we left the house and how much money he had to spend to empty the property. It is shocking how actions have consequences. And with this, we have reached the end of the video. However, if you cannot get enough of my content, please check out my endless playlist, where you can find thousands of hours of content. In addition, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel to not miss any of my daily uploads. Thank you so much in advance, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.